It began with a quiet arrival no one expected to witness. A black Range Rover slipping through a private Clarence House entrance. No cameras, no official statement, no royal rota warning. But within minutes, whispers exploded across palace corridors that Queen Camilla had just met Prince Harry face-to-face for the first time since reconciliation talks secretly began. And according to insiders, the meeting was far more emotional and far more dangerous than anyone inside the monarchy had prepared for. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Reports suggest Harry arrived in London under a level of secrecy normally reserved for matters of national security rather than family reconciliation. Even longtime palace staff were allegedly unaware of his movements until after he had already entered Clarence House through a private side corridor, usually used for sensitive diplomatic arrivals. That alone was enough to ignite panic inside royal administrative circles. For years, every communication between Harry and the institution he once called home had carried tension, suspicion, and the lingering scars of my betrayal. The idea that Camilla herself had quietly opened the door to a private conversation stunned even veteran courtiers, who believed the fractures inside the House of Windsor had become permanent. Insiders whisper that aides were specifically instructed to keep the visit entirely absent from official schedules, an extraordinary move considering how carefully monitored royal movements usually are. No briefing papers circulated. No rota confirmations were issued. It was as though the meeting itself was never supposed to exist. But secrecy inside the monarchy rarely survives for long. Within hours, palace corridors reportedly filled with whispers that the conversation had been initiated after worsening concerns surrounding King Charles III and his ongoing health struggles. Different interpretations of the situation describe a royal household growing increasingly fragile behind closed doors, emotionally exhausted by years of conflict, and now confronted by the terrifying reality of time itself. According to sources familiar with the atmosphere inside Clarence House, Camilla had become deeply concerned about the possibility of irreversible family fractures, while Charles continued to peepant away from public view. Some insiders even claim Charles was informed only shortly before the encounter took place, fueling speculation that the Queen Consort may have acted independently in an attempt to prevent total emotional collapse within the family. That revelation reportedly sent shockwaves through Kensington Palace. Because while the public often sees the monarchy as a united institution, those inside its walls understand that trust has become one of the rarest currencies in royal life. William's inner circle was allegedly blindsided by the sudden communication between Camilla and Harry, especially given the years of emotional damage left behind by interviews, memoirs, and public accusations. Palace administrative streams, ranging from security staff to communications aides, reportedly began quietly asking the same dangerous question. Why now? Why risk reopening wounds that had barely stopped bleeding? Sources suggest old grievances resurfaced almost immediately during the meeting itself. Harry, according to whispers circulating through royal circles, remained deeply emotional about the isolation he and Meghan experienced after stepping away from royal duties. Camilla, meanwhile, allegedly pushed for caution, restraint, and some form of fragile dialogue before circumstances surrounding Charles became even more uncertain. However, the deeper fear was not simply about emotional reconciliation. It was about power, about access, about influence during one of the most vulnerable chapters of Charles's reign. Speculation rapidly intensified that Harry may have been negotiating conditions for a temporary return to royal life, perhaps not publicly at first, but quietly, gradually, through carefully controlled appearances tied to family obligations. Royal commentators immediately divided into opposing camps. Some believed reconciliation represented a necessary act of healing for a family already burdened by illness and instability. Others warned that bringing Harry back into the royal orbit without clear boundaries could trigger a fresh institutional crisis, capable of destabilizing the monarchy at the precise moment it could least afford another public fracture. And yet, according to insiders, the emotional atmosphere inside that private room may have been even heavier than the political consequences waiting outside it. Because beneath all the protocol, the bitterness, and the years of public warfare stood a family confronting its own mortality. A father growing weaker, a son standing at a distance he once thought permanent, a queen consort trying to navigate loyalties that were becoming increasingly impossible to balance. But what truly shook palace insiders wasn't the meeting itself, it was the possibility that Camilla had begun building a secret bridge back to Harry without William's knowledge. For years, the silence between Prince Harry and the royal household had hardened into something colder than resentment. It became institutional, formal, almost irreversible, which is why palace veterans reportedly froze when word spread that Queen Camilla had personally opened the door to reconciliation talks the rest of the monarchy had quietly abandoned. The fracture between Harry and the House of Windsor did not happen overnight. According to royal insiders, it deepened slowly, painfully, through years of distrust, public accusations, and emotional distance that transformed private family conflict into an international spectacle. What once began as tension over royal responsibilities eventually spiraled into interviews, memoirs, and revelations that shook the monarchy to its core. Palace aides allegedly viewed every public statement as another crack spreading through an already fragile institution. And while some family relationships managed to survive in silence behind closed doors, others reportedly collapsed completely under the weight of humiliation, betrayal, and wounded pride. Different interpretations of Harry's departure describe a man who felt cornered and unheard. But within palace walls, many saw something far more dangerous unfolding: a prince who no longer trusted the institution he was born into, and an institution that no longer knew how to trust him in return. The situation reportedly became even more explosive after private accusations involving Camilla herself began circulating through royal circles. Insiders whisper that some members of the family believed Harry blamed her influence for widening divisions between himself and his father during the final years before his departure from royal life. Though nothing was ever openly acknowledged, tensions surrounding Camilla allegedly intensified behind closed doors long before the public fully understood how severe the fractures had become. Palace. Veterans reportedly feared that any direct confrontation between Harry and Camilla would only deepen old wounds that had never properly healed. That is why news of their private meeting stunned so many inside the royal establishment. Because according to those familiar with the emotional landscape surrounding the monarchy, this was not simply a conversation. It was the reopening of a conflict the institution had spent years trying desperately to contain. And perhaps no one viewed the danger more seriously than Prince William. Reports suggest William considered reconciliation efforts not only emotionally risky, but institutionally reckless. Those close to the future king allegedly believe the monarchy survived the turbulence of recent years only by creating clear emotional and operational distance from the Sussexes. Reopening direct communication, especially during such a vulnerable period for the crown, reportedly triggered immediate alarm within Kensington Palace. Sources familiar with William's thinking claim he remains deeply focused on protecting long-term stability for the monarchy, particularly for his children and the future generation of royals. To him, according to whispers, emerged from inside palace corridors, trust once broken on such a public scale could never fully return without consequences. And yet, while William reportedly viewed caution as necessary, others inside the royal family were beginning to fear something else entirely: the possibility that continued division could become permanent. At the center of that fear stood King Charles III. Insiders increasingly described Charles as emotionally exhausted, physically weakened, and quietly isolated as treatment and royal responsibilities continued placing enormous pressure on him behind the scenes. Various interpretations of his current state suggest a monarch struggling to balance duty with family heartbreak while confronting the limitations of time itself. According to palace administrative streams, Camilla began positioning herself not merely as Charles's protector, but as the only person capable of preventing complete emotional collapse within the family. Some insiders even claim she believes history would judge the monarchy harshly if reconciliation was never attempted before it became too late. That belief reportedly became the driving force behind her decision to quietly reach out to Harry despite Maya's stance from other royal factions. But inside the palace, unity remained impossible. Palace aides reportedly became divided over whether Harry could ever truly be trusted again after years of public fallout. Some argued reconciliation represented maturity and survival during a moment of national uncertainty. Others warned that renewed Sussex involvement could destabilize public confidence in the monarchy all over again, reopening divisions the institution had only barely survived. Senior courtiers allegedly feared that even a symbolic return by Harry could reignite media warfare, encourage fresh leaks, and create dangerous confusion around the monarchy's future direction. Royal staff were reportedly instructed to closely monitor information surrounding Harry's movements in London, with extraordinary attention placed on preventing details of private conversations from reaching the press before official households could regain control of the narrative. And yet, the deeper the reconciliation talks appeared to go, the more palace insiders began sensing that something even larger was unfolding beneath the surface. Because while the monarchy remained consumed by fears surrounding Harry, another shift was quietly beginning to emerge inside royal circles, one capable of changing alliances, reopening old loyalties, and threatening the fragile balance holding the family together. Yet behind the scenes, another problem was emerging because Harry wasn't the only royal suddenly willing to reopen old doors. The meeting itself reportedly lasted less than 90 minutes, but according to whispers circulating through royal administrative circles, those 90 minutes may have altered the future balance of power inside the House of Windsor more than anyone realizes. Inside Clarence House, away from official staff corridors and carefully controlled royal schedules, sources claim Queen Camilla and Prince Harry sat together in a private sitting room normally reserved for deeply sensitive family discussions. No senior advisors were reportedly present for most of the conversation. No communications secretaries hovered nearby. Even longtime household aides were allegedly kept at a distance. According to insiders familiar with the atmosphere surrounding the meeting, the silence inside that room carried years of unresolved anger, grief, and emotional exhaustion. This was not simply a royal discussion about schedules or appearances. It was the collision of two figures who had spent years trapped on opposite sides of one of the monarchy's most painful public fractures. Reports suggest the tone remained cautious at first. Harry allegedly spoke carefully, almost guarded, aware that every word now carried consequences far beyond private family emotion. Different interpretations of the conversation describe moments of restraint mixed with visible frustration as old wounds quietly resurfaced beneath the surface. Sources close to palace administrative circles claim the atmosphere changed dramatically once discussions shifted toward Prince William. That, according to whispers inside Clarence House, was the moment tension reportedly entered the room in full force. William's name has long represented the deepest fracture in Harry's royal life, not simply because of their personal conflict, but because both brothers increasingly symbolize opposing visions of loyalty, duty, and survival inside the monarchy itself. According to palace insiders, Harry reportedly expressed regret over the public damage caused by years of interviews, media battles, and emotionally charged accusations that left the institution shaken. But insiders also claim he stopped short of fully withdrawing every criticism he had previously made. That distinction reportedly mattered enormously. Because while some members of the royal family may privately desire peace, there remains deep anxiety surrounding accountability and trust. Those familiar with the internal dynamics of Kensington Palace suggest William continues viewing public reconciliation without meaningful acknowledgement of past damage as politically dangerous and emotionally impossible. Harry, meanwhile, allegedly remains convinced that many of his grievances were never properly understood inside palace walls. That emotional deadlock reportedly lingered heavily over the conversation even during its quieter moments. Camilla, according to multiple palace whispers, attempted to steer the discussion away from blame and toward survival. Sources suggest she urged Harry to focus on healing before legacy, warning that the family's emotional fractures risked becoming permanent if reconciliation efforts failed now. Insiders claim she repeatedly emphasized the emotional toll Charles's condition has taken on the family behind closed doors, portraying the king not as a distant monarch but as an aging father carrying immense private pain. That approach reportedly shifted the mood of the meeting, because beneath years of public warfare remained a shared awareness that time itself was becoming a frightening factor inside the House of Windsor. Sources familiar with the discussion claim Harry quietly sought reassurances regarding future access to King Charles III during his illness. That issue, according to insiders, carried enormous emotional weight. Reports suggest Harry feared further distance, further barriers, further lost time while Charles continued treatment away from public view. Palace veterans reportedly described prolonged silences throughout portions of the meeting, moments where neither side immediately knew how to navigate the emotional damage accumulated over recent years. Those silences, according to one insider interpretation, revealed more than the words themselves. Because beneath the royal titles, beneath the institutional conflict, sat a family confronting vulnerability it could no longer fully control. Outside the room, however, the machinery of the monarchy was already reacting. Security agents surrounding the meeting reportedly triggered immediate speculation among palace staff, particularly after unexplained route changes and temporary access restrictions were quietly implemented around Clarence House corridors. Royal aides allegedly began piecing together fragments of information long before any formal acknowledgement could emerge. Rumors rapidly intensified that follow-up discussions may already be under consideration, perhaps involving additional family members or carefully controlled meetings designed to prevent total collapse in royal relations. And as whispers spread deeper through palace networks, the emotional atmosphere surrounding the monarchy reportedly shifted from cautious surprise to outright alarm. Because many insiders now feared this meeting was not an isolated event, but the beginning of something much larger, far more unpredictable, and potentially far more divisive than anyone had anticipated. But as news of the encounter slowly reached Kensington Palace, insiders claim Prince William's reaction changed the atmosphere completely. If Camilla believed the meeting would quietly calm tensions inside the monarchy, reports suggest the exact opposite may have happened. Because once William's closest advisors learned reconciliation talks had advanced behind closed doors, the mood reportedly shifted from cautious concern to outright alarm. Inside Kensington Palace, according to insiders, the reaction was immediate and deeply emotional. Senior advisors surrounding Prince William allegedly viewed the secret discussions not as a hopeful step toward healing, but as a potentially dangerous reopening of wounds the monarchy had spent years trying to survive. What unsettled them most, according to palace whispers, was not simply the fact that Prince Harry had met privately with Queen Camilla. It was the growing realization that the talks had progressed without meaningful consultation from the future king's household. In an institution built on coordination, hierarchy, and carefully controlled communication, that omission reportedly felt personal as well as political. Some insiders described the atmosphere inside Kensington Palace as tense, restrained, almost disbelieving. Others quietly warned that trust between royal households was now entering a dangerously fragile phase. According to sources familiar with William's inner circle, the central fear remained painfully simple. Harry's return, even in limited form, could reopen emotional and public wounds that had never fully healed. The monarchy, after years of scandal, interviews, memoirs, and relentless media warfare, had only just begun rebuilding a sense of stability around the younger generation of royals. William's advisors reportedly fear that renewed Sussex involvement could instantly drag the institution backward into another cycle of division and damaging headlines. Palace veterans allegedly remember all too clearly how quickly private disagreements once exploded into global controversies. That memory continues to haunt nearly every conversation surrounding Harry's place within the family. Because for many inside the palace, reconciliation no longer exists as a purely emotional question. It has become a matter of institutional survival. Reports also suggest Catherine, Princess of Wales, remains deeply cautious regarding any renewed contact with Harry. Though palace aides avoid discussing her views publicly, insiders whisper that Catherine has grown increasingly protective of her immediate family after years of emotional turbulence surrounding the royal feud. Different interpretations of her position describe a woman focused almost entirely on preserving stability for her children, while supporting William during one of the most difficult periods of his public and private life. According to palace administrative streams, Catherine's concern reportedly centers less on personal resentment and more on unpredictability. The fear, insiders claim, is that even carefully managed reconciliation efforts could eventually spiral beyond anyone's control once media pressure and public scrutiny intensify again. That fear reportedly extends throughout palace staff as well. Royal aides allegedly worry constantly about future leaks, unauthorized disclosures, or even the possibility of another memoir containing deeply private conversations from within royal walls. For years, insiders claimed the institution has operated under an atmosphere of emotional caution whenever Harry's name surfaces behind closed doors. Some courtiers reportedly believe Camilla underestimated just how profound the distrust surrounding Harry has become within certain parts of the royal establishment. To her supporters, she may view reconciliation as an act of emotional responsibility, during a painful chapter for the family. But to others inside the palace, Her actions allegedly risk destabilizing carefully restored boundaries that were created for a reason. At the heart of William's reported frustration lies something even more personal: his determination to protect the future for Prince George of Wales, Princess Charlotte of Wales, and Prince Louis of Wales. Sources close to Kensington Palace claim William increasingly views every major decision through the lens of long-term stability for the next generation. According to insiders, he believes public reconciliation optics mean very little if they ultimately expose his children to renewed institutional chaos or emotional instability. That mindset has reportedly shaped nearly every internal conversation surrounding Harry's potential role moving forward. Discussions have already allegedly begun regarding future boundaries, future access, and future expectations if Harry's visits to the United Kingdom become more frequent. Palace officials are said to be quietly debating what controlled interaction might realistically look like without creating confusion surrounding royal duties or reopening institutional vulnerabilities. As those conversations intensified behind palace walls, royal observers began noticing signs of something larger beginning to form beneath the surface. Different households within the monarchy appeared increasingly divided not only over Harry himself, but over the future direction of the institution during Charles's reign and beyond. Some insiders now speculate that a silent power struggle may quietly be emerging between Clarence House and Kensington Palace, driven by fundamentally different ideas about loyalty, forgiveness, and the survival of the crown. And while tensions intensified behind palace gates, another shocking detail began leaking into the press, one that transformed the meeting from private family diplomacy into a full royal crisis. By the next morning, the whispers were everywhere. Not just inside Buckingham Palace corridors, but across political circles, media offices, and even among former royal staff who believed the Sussex chapter had finally closed forever. Suddenly, one terrifying question was consuming everyone. Was Prince Harry preparing to come back? The speculation spread with astonishing speed. What began as quiet murmurs inside palace corridors are reportedly transformed overnight into a national conversation about the future of the monarchy itself. Royal commentators, former aides, and media insiders all appeared to reach the same unsettling conclusion at once. The secret meeting between Harry and Queen Camilla may not have been symbolic at all. According to sources familiar with the growing panic inside royal communications offices, fears intensified that discussions had already moved beyond emotional reconciliation and into something far more politically explosive. The possibility of Harry resuming even limited royal responsibilities during King Charles III's illness suddenly no longer sounded impossible. And for many inside the institution, that realization landed like a shockwave. Reports suggest palace officials quietly began examining what a temporary royal return could realistically look like if Charles's condition continued limiting his public workload. Different interpretations of those discussions describe an atmosphere of hesitation mixed with desperation. The monarchy, already operating under immense emotional and institutional pressure, reportedly faces a shrinking number of senior working royals capable of maintaining the demanding pace expected by the crown. Some insiders claim Harry may now be seeking a more structured and controlled relationship with the institution, not a full return to his previous role, but something less distant, less hostile, and potentially more sustainable over time. That possibility alone reportedly terrified certain royal factions who believed the Sussex separation had finally created clear boundaries after years of instability. Public reaction immediately became divided. Royal commentators appeared split almost down the middle over whether forgiveness on such a public scale was even possible anymore. Some argued reconciliation represented maturity, healing, and necessary compassion during a painful chapter for the family. Others warned that the monarchy risked sending a disastrous message if years of public conflict, accusations, and institutional damage could simply be absorbed without lasting consequences. According to palace insiders, the deeper concern remained private rather than public. Many reportedly fear renewed tensions between Harry and Prince William could quietly worsen behind closed doors, even if outward appearances suggested calm. The emotional distance between the brothers, according to those familiar with the situation, has become far more complicated than media headlines alone can fully capture. That fear reportedly intensified as criticism toward Camilla began growing louder. Some royal observers accused her of overstepping delicate family boundaries by privately advancing reconciliation efforts without broader agreement between royal households. Palace veterans allegedly questioned whether she underestimated the depth of institutional distrust surrounding Harry after years of emotional and public warfare. To her critics, the meeting represented dangerous interference during one of the monarchy's most fragile periods. But others close to Clarence House insist Camilla views the situation very differently. According to whispers circulating through royal administrative circles, she believes continued division threatens to leave permanent scars on the family during Charles's reign. Some insiders even claim she fears history itself may judge the monarchy harshly if reconciliation is never attempted before it becomes too late, adding even more tension to the crisis were growing reports that Charles privately supports the effort to rebuild communication with Harry despite resistance elsewhere inside the institution. Sources familiar with the king's emotional state describe a father increasingly worn down by illness, conflict, and years of painful separation from his youngest son. Different interpretations of Charles's position suggest he no longer views reconciliation primarily through institutional logic, but through deeply personal urgency. That shift, according to insiders, may now be creating a quiet divide between emotional loyalty and royal strategy within the House of Windsor itself. Outside palace walls, public sympathy reportedly became increasingly fractured. Some people demanded protection for the institution above all else, believing the monarchy's stability must come before private emotion. Others saw the situation through the lens of family suffering, arguing that illness and uncertainty should encourage healing rather than permanent exile. Meanwhile, rumors intensified that additional meetings involving senior royal advisors could already be under discussion behind closed doors. Palace staff allegedly began preparing for the possibility that this crisis was entering a far more serious phase than anyone first imagined. And with every new whisper, every new leak, and every new wave of speculation, the atmosphere surrounding the monarchy reportedly grew heavier, more uncertain, and far more volatile than before. But the deeper the reconciliation talks appeared to go, the clearer it became that this was no longer just about forgiveness. It was about the future shape of the monarchy itself. At the center of the storm stood King Charles III, physically weakened, emotionally cornered, and increasingly trapped between the son he still loved and the heir determined to protect the crown at all costs. According to insiders, that impossible balancing act is now pushing the monarchy toward one of its most fragile moments in decades. Behind the formal ceremonies, carefully measured appearances, and tightly controlled palace statements, sources suggest Charles has been fighting a deeply personal battle few people fully understand. Insiders whisper that his ongoing health struggles have not only drained him physically, but emotionally isolated him during one of the most unstable chapters of his reign. The burden, according to those close to royal administrative circles, has become overwhelming. On one side stands Prince Harry, the son whose departure shattered public perceptions of royal unity and reopened years of buried tension within the House of Windsor. On the other stands Prince William, the future king reportedly focused with relentless determination on protecting the long-term survival of the institution above everything else. Charles, insiders claim, now finds himself emotionally trapped between reconciliation and responsibility, between private fatherhood and public monarchy. Reports suggest Charles has become increasingly desperate to preserve some form of family unity before time slips beyond his control. Different interpretations of his private mindset describe a man haunted not only by illness, but by the fear of leaving behind permanent division inside the family he spent his entire life preparing to lead. Palace veterans allegedly say the king no longer views the Sussex conflict simply as a media scandal or institutional challenge. To him, according to whispers circulating through Clarence House, it has become an emotional wound that refuses to heal. That urgency reportedly explains why he has shown quiet openness toward reconciliation efforts, even while resistance continues building elsewhere within the monarchy. Some insiders claim Charles believes the public may forgive royal conflict eventually, but history itself may never forgive a family that refused every opportunity to heal while it still could. William, however, is said to view the crisis through a completely different lens. Sources familiar with Kensington Palace describe an heir increasingly focused on long-term institutional survival rather than emotional reconciliation. According to insiders, William fears that rebuilding trust with Harry too quickly could destabilize the monarchy during an already vulnerable period for the crown. The future king reportedly sees the institution as fragile after years of relentless public scrutiny, media warfare, and internal fractures that damaged confidence in royal unity. To him, palace observers suggest stability must come before sentiment, duty before emotion, structure before forgiveness. That perspective has allegedly intensified private disagreements inside royal households as discussions surrounding Harry's future role grow more serious. Meanwhile, Queen Camilla reportedly believes the family is running out of time. To repair old wounds. Insiders claim she has become increasingly convinced that continued emotional distance between Charles and Harry could leave irreversible scars on the monarchy long after the current crisis passes. According to sources familiar with Clarence House conversations, Camilla fears that unresolved bitterness combined with Charles's declining strength could eventually create a legacy defined more by division than unity. Her critics inside palace circles reportedly accuse her of pushing reconciliation too aggressively, too privately, and without sufficient coordination with Kensington Palace. But supporters argue she sees something others refuse to confront, that the emotional cost of continued separation may soon become unbearable. Harry himself is said to remain deeply conflicted. Different interpretations of his position describe a man torn between resentment, loyalty, mistrust, and emotional longing. Reports suggest he still struggles with the pain of past events, while simultaneously fearing further distance from his father during such a fragile period. Palace insiders claim Harry understands that public perception remains one of the greatest obstacles standing in the way of any meaningful reconciliation. Every appearance, every private meeting, every reported conversation now carries enormous symbolic weight. That pressure, according to sources, has left him cautious about how far renewed communication can realistically go without triggering another wave of public controversy. Throughout the palace, staff reportedly fear that any visible split between royal households could deeply destabilize confidence in the monarchy itself. Discussions have allegedly already begun surrounding strict future conditions for Sussex interactions, including boundaries around private access, public appearances, and communication protocols designed to prevent future institutional damage. Senior royal figures reportedly continue warning that reconciliation without accountability could create even greater crises down the road. And as those debates intensify behind closed doors, the monarchy increasingly appears divided between two competing forces: emotion and duty, forgiveness and survival, family loyalty and institutional preservation. And as private negotiations continued behind closed palace doors, insiders began whispering that the final outcome could remain. TLY redefine the House of Windsor forever. The real fear inside royal circles was never just about another family argument. It was about uncertainty. Because once reconciliation talks begin, the monarchy faces a question it has spent years trying to avoid. Can the institution truly forgive someone who once publicly turned against it? That question, according to palace insiders, now hangs over every private conversation taking place behind royal walls. For years, the monarchy managed to survive by creating distance, structure, and silence around the crisis involving Prince Harry. The separation, painful as it was, eventually became predictable. Palace households adapted to it. Royal schedules evolved around it. Public expectations settled into a new reality where Harry existed emotionally and institutionally outside the center of royal life. But the moment reconciliation discussions quietly resumed, that fragile certainty reportedly shattered. Suddenly, the monarchy found itself confronting a future no one had fully prepared for, a future where forgiveness, trust, and royal duty could collide in deeply unpredictable ways. Palace veterans are reportedly divided more sharply than ever over whether trust with Harry can truly return. Some insiders believe too much damage has already been done through years of public interviews, private accusations, and emotionally explosive revelations that permanently altered relationships inside the House of Windsor. According to whispers circulating through Kensington Palace, certain royal aides no longer view the issue emotionally at all. To them, the crisis has become institutional, structural. They fear that restoring closeness without absolute certainty could expose the monarchy to another cycle of instability, capable of weakening public confidence all over again. That fear reportedly explains why supporters surrounding Prince William continue insisting that consequences must remain permanent no matter how emotional the situation becomes behind closed doors. William's allies allegedly argue that the monarchy survived recent years only by enforcing clear boundaries after an unprecedented breakdown of trust. Different interpretations of their position describe a belief that forgiveness cannot erase institutional memory. They reportedly fear that allowing Harry too much visibility inside royal life again could confuse the pub. Reopen emotional divisions within the family, and create uncertainty around the future direction of the crown itself. Palace insiders claim William remains deeply focused on long-term stability for the monarchy and for the next generation represented by George, Charlotte, and Louis. According to sources familiar with his thinking, he believes protecting that future sometimes requires painful decisions that place duty above personal emotion. But inside Clarence House, the mood is reportedly very different. Allies surrounding Queen Camilla allegedly argue that the monarchy cannot survive endless internal warfare without eventually damaging itself beyond repair. Some insiders claim Camilla sees reconciliation not as weakness, but as necessity during a period of illness, uncertainty, and emotional exhaustion for the family. Her supporters reportedly believe continued hostility between William and Harry risks creating a permanent fracture that could define Charles's reign far more than any public achievement or constitutional milestone. According to whispers inside royal administrative circles, Camilla fears the monarchy may one day regret every opportunity for healing that was ignored while time still allowed it. Royal historians have also reportedly begun comparing the situation to previous succession-era fractures that once threatened royal stability in earlier generations. Some observers point to moments in royal history where emotional division quietly evolved into institutional crisis, leaving scars that lasted decades beyond the original conflict itself. That comparison has reportedly intensified fears surrounding public reaction if Harry regains even limited visibility at future royal events. Palace staff allegedly worry that every appearance would immediately trigger fresh scrutiny, renewed media obsession, and endless speculation surrounding power, loyalty, and forgiveness inside the monarchy. At the center of everything stands King Charles III, whom some insiders now believe increasingly sees reconciliation as part of the legacy he hopes to leave behind. Reports suggest Charles no longer measures the crisis solely through public relations or institutional strategy. Instead, according to sources close to palace circles, he views it through the deeply personal lens of family, mortality, and unfinished emotional wounds. Harry, meanwhile, reportedly understands that any path back toward closer royal ties would come with severe limitations, careful boundaries, and expectations unlike anything he once experienced as a working royal. That awareness, insiders claim, has left the ongoing dialogue emotionally tense, cautious, and far from resolved despite recent progress. Because beneath every quiet meeting and carefully controlled conversation remains a truth no one inside the monarchy can fully escape. The emotional damage has not disappeared. It has only become quieter, more fragile, and more dangerous beneath the surface. But even as palace officials tried to contain the fallout, one final revelation reportedly left insiders stunned and changed the meaning of the entire meeting.